Everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame, even if you're the younger brother of a much more famous red hat wearing hero. Luigi's Mansion is a great testament to bravery in the face of fear, and not overlooking someone's capabilities due to their personality or comfort zones. But more importantly in the gaming world, Luigi's Mansion shows that with proper polish, interesting characters, and fun mechanics, a horror game doesn't necessarily have to be terrifying. Sure, Resident Evil may be more likely to make you jump out of your seat as you're playing, but that doesn't mean that Luigi's adventure had anything less to do with the horror genre. Luigi may be scared, but he's pushing onward to help those in need. Most notably, his older brother, who came to check up on Luigi, but actually wound up in more dire straits himself. With clenched teeth, a fancy new vacuum, and the help of a kooky old scientist, Luigi's time to shine will happen in one of Nintendo's darkest games, creating a drastic change of pace from the parties and sunshine that usually follow the Mario Brothers. If we want to know how Nintendo created a game that somehow fit every criteria of a horror genre title, yet feels nothing like the rest of them, then we'll have to figure out what's so great about Luigi's Mansion. Released in 2001 as a launch title to the GameCube, this was a pretty large departure from Nintendo's norm, not having the iconic Mario headlining at release. Nonetheless, Luigi's Mansion was still the 5th best-selling GameCube game, even selling more copies in its opening week than Super Mario 64 did 5 years prior. This is virtually Nintendo's first and only proprietary horror game, and I think it was a brilliant premise for a much-loved and often overlooked character. So many people grew up as the second player to a family member, being stuck with Luigi in the early Super Mario games. In later entries, they may have even had the option of choosing to play as the green-capped brother. Maybe players began to enjoy the sense of familiarity. Maybe they liked his long jump in Super Mario Bros. 2. Maybe it's just that their favorite color is green. No matter the reason, the long-legged younger brother had amassed a fan club by the late 90s, but Nintendo had yet to capitalize on that fact. Each other main character in Nintendo's library has their iconic genres, styles, and even emotions that they elicit and feel directly tied to. Link and the Legend of Zelda series have a sense of discovery in the fantasy genre. Samus and the Metroid franchise ask players to embrace the unknown in the sci-fi action series. Star Fox demonstrates camaraderie, and F-Zero plays into competitive nature. And while Mario has the carefree attitude that allows him to party, play, and jump around with boundless energy, we need a little contrast in these brothers' dynamic. And the genre that has always had the least first-party representation on Nintendo's hardware is the horror genre. But how do you present a horror game on a family-friendly console? By making it one big mistake. Luigi isn't some hardened detective investigating a long-abandoned haunted asylum or trapped inside a nightmare realm. He just got tricked into this situation, and the goofy green plumber is scared out of his wits. He doesn't want to be there, and if it weren't for the fact that there are other people in danger, then there's no doubt that he would turn tail and find any other way he could out of this haunted house. But this premise gives Luigi the chance to be the hero, and honestly, in a lower stakes environment, relatively speaking. There's no doubt that this is a horror game, but that doesn't have to mean it's scary in the traditional sense of terrifying its audience. However, this title fits the bill by being unsettling and surprising in its own way. Luigi perceives all of these ghosts as major threats, so that takes a lot of the weight off of the player in terms of relaying the sense of dread and developing the stakes of the world. This game conveys the sensation of fear very quickly without uttering a single word. We see all we need to in that dialogue-free opening clip of Luigi warily wandering towards this uninviting mansion in the dark night. After a little bit of wandering around, trying locked doors, and eventually stumbling into a room of haunted paintings, Luigi will encounter his first ghost. Terrified and defenseless, Luigi is saved by a new friend, Professor E. Gadd. The professor will be there to help progress the story and keep this game from being a little too silent, but this is a horror game after all, so the player will most often be left to their own devices. You learn a lot about the way this game works from just the first few rooms. It's understood that there are ghosts in this house, but you don't really know the variety or behavior of these specters, as they're designed completely differently from the meek, face-covering boos we've seen in previous Super Mario titles. One by one, though, you'll be introduced to the different types of grunt-level enemies you'll face throughout the game, such as those first few orange ones you see, and the long ghosts that grab you, or the green ones that throw banana peels. In the third room you'll enter, the wardrobe room, you'll even discover that the ghosts don't just pop up whenever it's dark, but that these pranksters are sometimes concealed inside furniture and other pieces of the environment, ready to drop a minor jump scare on Luigi. Within these first few minutes of the game, you'll also begin to understand how you'll progress through each area of the mansion. At first, every room is dark and dusty, with locked doors blocking the majority of your progression. But the first key you receive is presented through a rather obvious ordeal with a cutscene, so there's little confusion as to how to open the doors that you can't get through immediately. The map on your Game Boy Horror, which EGAT has gifted you, will allow you to see the entire layout of the house from the start, even if some rooms don't have apparent ways in or out. When you do begin to collect some of these all-important keys, the map tells you which doors each key belongs to. This keeps the player from having to try every single doorknob they've come across, and is especially useful when coming back to the game between sessions and trying to remember which of the many rooms you were headed towards next. There's no legend on the map, but the rooms are sorted into areas through different pastel colors, making a subtle guide to which rooms are related more heavily to your current chapter and may still be in need of your attention. Something else that you may want to observe on the game's map is the fact that there are mimic doors that will knock down both your health and money if you try to open them. You can tell which doors they are because they don't appear on the map, but only in the physical world, so being cautious and thorough may help you at a critical moment of low health. Another nice little touch related to these mimics is the fact that they won't move or rattle when being vacuumed. The Game Boy Horror's inspection mode allows for a first-person glance around the room in order for a player to get a better look at what's going on in every dark corner. Keeping in mind that this would be the very first time many Nintendo players had ever used two joysticks at the same time, Nintendo did a good job of separating the functions and making the necessity of using both at the same time a very infrequent situation. Due to the game's simplistic layout of boxy rooms and cardinal direction hallways, the player usually only has to either look or walk, so even players to this day who have trouble with dual stick controls can manage Luigi's Mansion without too much frustration. One obvious exception to this rule is the secondary challenge of collecting all the game's boos. Not only are the boos slightly harder to find than the general ghosts who occupy the mansion, but they don't have hearts to lock onto, meaning the player has to utilize both control sticks in order to manually chase the boo around for an extra challenge. If you're not quick enough or make too many mistakes, then the boo you're chasing will float away to an adjacent room and need to be tracked down again. Aside from the boos and regular foot soldier ghosts, the real meat of the game focuses around the gallery ghosts. When presented with the empty gallery by Professor EGAT at the beginning of the game, he mentions that there are 21 frames in the gallery, so you know how many boss ghosts you may have to face along the way. Every one of these portrait ghosts is a little puzzle. Tracking them down is the first step, but after that, you'll have to pay attention to the little changes in movement and vocal cues if you want to be able to find the right moment to suck them up. You'll have to do a little detective work to discover some of these bosses' weaknesses, and those clues may come from either the environment or the ghosts themselves. For example, even when freezing the second gallery ghost, Lydia, with your inspection mode to analyze her, the only thing still moving is the curtain, so it makes sense that you would look into it and interact with the only other point of interest in this room. Some ghosts are introduced even before you have access to their weaknesses, or maybe even know what those weaknesses are. The introduction of elements one at a time opens new doors for the player while also keeping the adventure on an easily understood and easily completed path. The gallery ghosts may not feel like incredibly distinguishable bosses in terms of puzzle or challenge, but Nintendo did a great job of giving every named ghost a significant personality using only a few features, such as their visual design, a singular dialogue line when scanned by the Game Boy Horror, the room they appear in, or even how they move while trying to get away from the poltergeist. These discrepancies in the ghosts that reside in this mansion make every 5-minute interval of this game all the more memorable and distinguishable. After obtaining the key to the baby's room, you'll hear him cry out with a tiny cutscene. This insinuates that each section of the house has a boss fight that may be more difficult. Using otherworldly battlefields allows for decluttered boss fights where the player has much more mobility to dodge enemies or attacks, without having to worry about random bits of furniture getting in the way. This allows for a greater variety of end-of-chapter style fights that are very different from the usual routine of solving a little puzzle and then chasing the ghost around the room. It also means the bosses themselves can be a little meaner without being overwhelming in a tight space. Despite being short, this game's soundtrack is also very memorable. I think the biggest reason for that would be the fact that it is primarily sung by Luigi himself while you are playing. If a room or floor has been cleared, Luigi will whistle the game's main tune to raise his spirits during a moment of rest. But if there are still ghosts and other terrors around, he'll hum through clenched teeth. In another instance of Nintendo polish, Luigi's whistling will also slow down if he's low on health. With the tunes so ingrained in the experience of Luigi's Mansion as a whole, it won't be too long before the player finds themselves humming along with their digital friend. Luigi's Mansion was released so long ago that it was actually one of the last two games to use Nintendo 64-style artwork and renderings, and the length of the game also isn't much to shake a stick at. Nonetheless, this goofy, ghostly game still holds up nearly 2 decades later, and has warranted both a handheld remake and 2 direct sequels. Luigi may not always get the love he deserves, but this franchise certainly has, and the quality of these games is the reason for that. This isn't one of the grand Mario-based adventures that we're used to seeing as the opening number on Nintendo's consoles, but it's a suitable adventure for Mario's quiet brother. This game breaks the genre by not needing to establish any specific mood. A horror game can be, all at once, a little spooky, a little goofy, a little surprising, and a little fun. This is a great exercise in stretching the boundaries of what it means for a game to fit any genre or category. Once certain criteria are met, the understanding of what still fits in a genre can be stretched into a completely new shape. This is incredibly important in the development of video games as time goes on, to keep series, genres, and games in general from becoming stale. That is what's so great about Luigi's Mansion. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of What's So Great About Gaming, as we took a peek into Luigi's Mansion. Make sure to tell us what you think about Luigi's Mansion, or even suggest a game for another video. If you want to hear what's great about another game, check out the link to our last episode, Pokemon's 3rd Generation, on screen or in the description, and please take the time to subscribe to be involved in the discussions here. Thanks again for watching. Now go play a great game. We'll see you next time.